a very special Monday night episode of the Dynasty365 show. Guys, we are here tonight with Tyler Howell. As always, we have got our Fantasy and Frames CEO, Jorge Edwards, with us. Guys, we have got a very, very special guest. We've got David Gautieri here from Guru Fantasy World. I'm your host, Stacy Perez. Guys, tonight we are going to be doing part 2 of our Sophomore Breakout Player Series. Guys, let's do it. Before we get started, remember to go on over, hit that subscribe button on YouTube if you haven't already. Make sure to like all of our content here at Fantasy and Frames. You can find us online on Twitter, everywhere, for more amazing fantasy football content from all of our family here at Fantasy and Frames. Guys, I just want to welcome David to the show tonight. Guys, he's the founder of Guru Fantasy World. You can find him on Twitter at Guru Fantasy World. It's right there on the screen if you are watching. He is a former writer here at Fantasy Frames and always a member of our family. David, how are you doing? Thank you so much for spending your evening with us.
I'm doing great, and props to you. You're probably the best host at pronouncing my last name off just a guess. And you didn't even ask in the pre-show how to pronounce it, and most people do. So A+ for that. It's great coming back. This was the first place I ever wrote for somebody to actually publish it. So it's great getting back with the Fantasy and Frames here. I used to do the Waiver Wire article. So that was my niche. It's where I started. So, it's great to get back to my roots. I'm looking forward to the show tonight.
Awesome. David, my high school Italian teacher would be so happy to hear what you just said. So
you guys had Italian in high school?
I had Italian in high school. Yeah. I thought it'd be more fun than Spanish or French. So there you go. But she would be so happy to hear that.
Yeah, I think we only had Spanish and French as options at my high school.
We're a little bougie down here in Tampa.
I did learn a little Spanish, though.
Oh, see, there you go. See, I don't know any Spanish.
Un poquito. Yo hablo un poquito español.
Yes. Despite my last name, I cannot habla at all.
Yep, despite my first name, I don't know what you just said. Sorry, Mom.
There you go. Guys, tonight, before we get into our obviously very serious fantasy football conversation, I like to ask a fun, friendly, random question to everybody. And so tonight, I want to know, who is the most random NFL player who has ever helped you win a championship? David, you're up. You're going to go first since you're our guest.
I've got two. The first one that's special to my heart is the one season wonder. He was a Cleveland Brown. That probably doesn't give you a whole lot of clarity because they've had more than one season wonder. They've just chock full of them over in Cleveland. But this was a running back, just a little itty bitty guy, came out of nowhere. And his name was Jerome Harrison. And I'll never forget scooping him up off the waiver wire because I scooped him up the same year Jamal Charles was a breakout as a rookie. I scooped them both up off the waivers, and they had like a 30-point game against each other. I think it was like week 13. Rode Jerome Harrison to a fantasy playoff finish. Took me to a championship. And then one more just rando was just Tim Hightower. I'll never forget riding him in his New Orleans days as well. Won a couple of fantasy championships out of the back of Tim Hightower. So he'll always have a special place in my heart as well.
Nice. And Albert, hello. Thank you for joining us in the chat. Guys, make sure that you're putting your comments and questions in the chat. If you're watching here tonight, we'll make sure to get to them. Jorge, I want to hear your story. I want to hear your random player.
So my random player has been taken by Tyler. Thank you very much, Tyler. So at the last minute, I decided, you know what? Let me tell you a better story from a better man. Somebody here who has been very instrumental at Fantasy and Frames. Ken Sonnenberg has been with us since 2018. He mostly, he helped with content in the beginning, and he's just basically been a big supporter. And his dad and him had this fantasy football league. His dad is no longer with us, but his dad would always beat Ken when it mattered most in fantasy championships. And so there was one year where Ken was just waiting for a Monday night game between the Vikings and the Chicago Bears to end. And this was going to be redemption because Ken the previous year lost in heartbreaking fashion thanks to Billy Volek of the Tennessee Titans going off at 400 yards and 5 touchdowns. I know Billy Volek. So then you flash forward to this Monday night game versus the Vikings and the Bears. And just to give you some idea, it was Brett Favre of the Vikings, Jay Cutler of the Bears. You flash forward a couple years before that, it was a Monday night game with Brett Favre with the Packers, hitting in overtime Greg Jennings in stride to beat Jay Cutler and the Broncos at Mile High. So flash forward a couple years forward, again, going back to this Monday night game. I'm going to pull it up on screen here. And the player here that we want to talk about is Devin Aromashadu. So we're just, the audio is not going to be there, but you'll be able to see what's going on here, folks. Mr. Sonnenberg had Devin Aromashadu, and all Ken needed was for this game in overtime to end. Well, it ended.
Or you got to do like the play-by-play.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah, Aromashadu catches a touchdown. Sorry, for those who are listening, Aromashadu got a touchdown bomb in overtime to basically seal the victory for Mr. Sonnenberg. Again, random, one-hit wonder here. But it won Mr. Sonnenberg a championship, so kudos to him.
Very nice. As I see Jamie over in the chat, Fantasy and Frames with a picture. It's always perfect. Jamie, I appreciate that. We absolutely love being pandered to here on Fantasy and Frames, so keep it up in the chat, please. Tyler, let's hear your person.
I just want to compliment Jorge on his Major League-esque play-by-play.
Fly ball.
You're welcome.
But my player is yet another Cleveland Browns. It is kind of a one-hit wonder. It was a big season for him. But it was their very own Gary Barnidge. His 2015 season was absolutely off the rails. He finished the tight end 3 that year. He would have been the tight end 2 by like 30 points this year. Right, and he was right behind Gronk and Jordan Reed. But he went for 1,043 yards, 79 receptions, and 9 touchdowns that year. I didn't even know he produced that much. But I got this guy at the end of the draft because I was a Cleveland Browns fan, and this was 2015. Like, I didn't really get into playing fantasy until I went to college until I was in college in like 2009, and I sucked at it. And this was around the time where Gary Barnidge actually got me into loving fantasy football because he was just so awesome that year and won me a championship. And I never turned back, and now I'm a huge nerd. But thank you, Gary Barnidge. I got to call him out. Amazing race veteran, finished in 4th place with D'Angelo Williams. So, man, the myth, the legend. I think he should come on the show.
Do you have a Gary Barnidge jersey?
No, I don't.
Why
I need
not?
to get one. If he comes on the show, I'm getting one.
Yeah.
It should say Barnkowski on it, though, because I think that was his nickname during that season.
That's true. I remember he caught one with like his legs. I vividly remember that. It like hit him in the face and he fell into the end zone and he caught it with his knees.
That's awesome.
I mean, that takes talent. That takes an absolute.
And what did I say? Another one-hit wonder from the Cleveland Browns.
Yeah, I thought you were going to say Peyton Hillis.
Yeah, I'm sure plenty of people have memories with him as well.
Guys, all right. So my player, slightly controversial player, though. At the time, I don't think he was quite as controversial. Tyler, I hope you're looking at the chat because Jamie can hook you up with a Barnidge jersey for a mere $17. So I feel like that's a great deal. I feel like you've got to contact.
I will be sliding into your DMs like Willie Mays Hayes. Yet another Major League reference. Boom, got
Nice.
2.
I love it.
We'll just see how many of those we can get in before the end of the show. Guys, so my player, Fantasy Football Garage, what is up? My player is the one, the only, Cole Beasley from the Bills, 2020. I was in the playoffs in the Kentucky Fantasy Football State Championship, and it was the last week. So it was week 13 before you moved on to the tournament style to finish up, the year with the last, few weeks. And Jorge, remember when Antonio Gibson went down a couple years ago back in 2020? He the first quarter, hurt his foot, something like that. And he was out for the rest of the game, playing the Bills, obviously. And oh no, they weren't playing the Bills. My other person who I was playing had Antonio Gibson. I don't remember who they were playing. Anyway, and the guy that he would have beat me, right? With Antonio Gibson, I thought, oh my God, like, you know, like I get the notification that Gibson has left the game, and I'm just like, oh, I have a chance to win. And Cole Beasley went off for 28 points and secured me the victory. And my fun little trophy back here is my division championship. Yep. So I have him to thank for that. Good call on me not getting a Cole Beasley jersey because I thought about it right afterwards. So that wouldn't have aged well. So glad I didn't. But always thankful to Mr. Beasley for his contribution to the team.
Love it.
Yeah. All right, guys. So tonight we are going to be finishing up our sophomore breakout candidates. Our show last week with Britt Flynn, we did the first part of that. There were so many players that we could talk about, and we just didn't have time to get everybody into 1 hour last week. So we wanted to make this into a 2-part series. So we're going to be doing this week in kind of a round robin style, going around from person to person, picking your player and discussing them. And these are going to be guys who are potentially in line for a breakout season in 2023. So we're not talking about Garrett Wilson, right? We're not talking about Chris Olave or Breece Hall. Like those guys broke out. Okay. We know they're a thing. We know that they are big time fantasy players, and regular players too. But we don't need to be worried about them breaking out this year. So we're going to talk about some lesser known guys, some guys that you might want to be keeping on your radar for picks for this season. Guys, David, you are our guest. We are going to start with you. Who's your first pick?
So my first pick, I got basically what was left on the show. It was Slim Pickens, so to say. And I ended up going with a guy who I actually kind of like, and it's George Pickens. He's my first one of 3, and he's got both pros and cons to his profile. I think all 3 players I ended up with have both pros and cons, so I think it'll be fun to talk about them. Pickens, obviously, he was a very good college player. He checked a lot of boxes as a prospect. He was a true freshman breakout at Georgia, which is great. We want to see players producing early in their college career. He was an early declare, which means he just went to the NFL after 3 years in college, as opposed to players who need to say 4, maybe even 5 years in college before going pro. So just looking back at the past 10 years, early declares versus non-early declare wide receivers. And this is coming from Sharp Football Analysis. So the hit rates for a wide receiver 3 season, non-early declares have about a 12% hit rate for wide receiver 3 season. Early declares 38% versus 12. You look at wide receiver 2 seasons, 6% hit rate for non-early declare wide receivers, 31% hit rate for the early declares. So then we look at wide receiver 1 seasons, which is what we're really chasing. You get 2% hit rate for the non-early declares, 19% hit rate for the early declares. So that's really good that George Pickens is in the early declare box. He was a true freshman breakout. He was an early declare, and then he was drafted pretty high. He was a 2nd-round pick as well. So he had a good prospect profile coming into the NFL. And then we look at his rookie season. He put up 800 yards on about 50 receptions, which is pretty good, especially considering this is his first full year off an ACL tear. He played the last game of his Georgia career. He was dealing with poor quarterback play and Kenny Pickett, Mitchell Trubisky. Pickett was a rookie, dealing with competition from Deontay Johnson, Freiermuth, Chase Claypool started the year. Still ended up with 800 yards as a rookie. If we look at since 2000, round 1, round 2 wide receivers to put up 800 plus yards as a rookie, 24 out of 36 hit or paced for 1,000 plus yards in their second season, which is 66%, 2 out of 3 hit or paced for 1,000 plus yards in their second year. And when I say hit or pace, I just mean if they didn't hit it, they say they played 12 games, they were pacing for it, and they got injured. So it's just accounting for injury. And then we look at just the early declares. Since 2000, round 1, round 2 wide receivers drafted in the NFL draft, if they put up 800 plus yards as a rookie, 18 out of 21 of the early declares who did that as a rookie put up 1,000 plus yards in year 2. So that's a really good signal for George Pickens to go over 1,000 plus yards in year 2. And when we look at the Dynasty outlook in particular, He also has age on his side, so he's young. He's got a trajectory going upward where it's still a projection a little bit. So people will be a lot more excited even if it's just barely 1,000 yards versus maybe another guy in that range like Christian Kirk, who, if he barely hits 1,000 yards, he's a little bit older. His values might even go down. It'll probably hold or go down a little bit, whereas Pickens will go up. So he's got that in his favor. The downside is he's kind of one-dimensional. He did lead the NFL in contested target conversion rate, about 68% of all wide receivers with 20-plus targets, but his reception perception numbers were not good. He was 34th percentile versus man, 5th percentile versus zone. So it's like a route runner, not good. 69th percentile versus press, which is good. But he's not a route runner. In his system, he was running a go basically 33% of the time. So that's just not a high target rate route. Their offensive coordinator, Matt Canada, is returning. So he just lacks creativity from a play calling standpoint. We don't know about Kenny Pickett if he's going to be that good. So the ceiling might be capped a little bit unless he can evolve as a route runner. He didn't really add much as a yards after the catch element. So he's a little bit one-dimensional, but he does have that one trump card where he's always open, right? Just throw it to him and let him go up and get it. And George Pickens can do that. So I think he's a little bit on both sides of the overrated, underrated spectrum, depending on who you're asking. But I wouldn't outright dismiss George Pickens just because, some of the per route numbers and the reception perception numbers, because he does have that trump card and he's a ball winner.
Pickens makes some really pretty catches. And Jamie kind of pointed out here in the chat that Pickens' dad played for the Bengals in the 90s, and his great uncle is Bo Jackson. I think he meant to say Bo Jackson of No Jackson. And then he's friends with Cam Newton. So I mean, they're like, this guy's got quite the pedigree. But I'm a big George Pickens fan. I might talk about a Steelers fan or a Steelers player here too, but not just yet because I want to move on to Jorge. Tell me who your first player is going to be.
So I'm going to switch up my order here and stick with the trend here that David started with wide receiver. And I'm going to be talking about somebody who we talked about last week, and we even gave this person some entrance music.
You know I love a London boy. I enjoy walking Camden, walking in the afternoon.
Talking, of course, of Drake London. Thank you, Taylor Swift. Talking about Drake London of the Atlanta Falcons. Look, he was a first-round pick. He was on a low passing volume offense with Marcus Mariota and his poor quarterback play. It wasn't great. 17 games, though, 117 targets, 72 receptions, 866 yards, and 4 touchdowns. When we're looking at things from a fantasy point per game point of view, for those that still enjoy non-PPR, he was averaging you 6.3 a game for half, 8.4 for full, 10.5. So what does that mean in terms of wide receiver finishes? In non-PPR, he finished as the wide receiver 49, 46 in half, and 31 in full PPR. He had, for more information about, again, for Drake London, after I get done with this, don't forget to head over to fantasyandframes.com. Drew Scott put together a great article there, great profile video that you can also see on our YouTube channel. So don't forget to head over there, watch that, hit like, subscribe, hit that notification bell so you're notified whenever we put out more content. Shameless plug out of the way. When we look at his key stats from last year, he had the 5th highest target share among wide receivers in 2022 with a 29.4%, and the 2nd highest target rate in the NFL with 32.4%. You look at the production that he had down the stretch, starting in week 13, 12 targets. Then when you had Desmond Ridder come in, relief of Mariota, you had 11, 9, 8, 8. You were getting double-digit fantasy points in the half PPR. Just somebody who, there is some concern in the sense that we don't know really what to expect from Desmond Ridder. You have the drafting of Bijan Robinson. You have Tyler Algier, who I get it. Obviously, the hype behind Bijan Robinson. This guy is, I hate using this expression, but he comes across as that generational talent guy. But Algier, he played really well. This offense for the Atlanta Falcons is a very run-first oriented offense. So, you run the risk of, much like with Pickens, you're capping some of his upside based off of the offensive style. But for me, what really sets this player apart is just the target volume. The target volume, the target volume, the target volume. Aside from Kyle Pitts, for all intents and purposes, is the second wide receiver on that team. And then they brought in, I believe, Jonnu Smith in the offseason. So there's definitely a lot of room for upside here for Drake London. You don't need the quarterback play to be fantastic. I don't need Desmond Ridder to be an MVP. I just need him to get the ball to his best wide receiver. And he was doing that down the stretch in ugly fashion. But he was doing that, and you saw Drake London have a lot of success down the stretch of last year. And he could definitely be somebody with given a full season with Ridder at the helm. And, of course, Ridder's getting a full offseason as a starting quarterback this year. So there's tons of opportunity there. But, you run the risk of, is this still going to be a run-oriented team, run-heavy first team that could potentially cap his upside? Potentially. But if the target volume is there, which it should be, Drake London is definitely poised for a breakout season.
I like it. It looks like Jamie also in the chat, London Bridges. There's so many London songs that we could have applied to this. But I think we just need to start incorporating Taylor Swift in all of our shows. We've got it. We're on a streak now. So maybe next week we can get that one into.
Sure.
Yeah. Tyler, you had a stat about George Pickens, and I did not mean to skip over you. So I just wanted to hear what that stat was real quick before we move on to our next player.
Tyler who, right, Stacy?
Who? What? Every time.
My favorite stat that I saw as I was just kind of doing research on all these sophomore receivers, Pickens had a 73.1 first down percentage of all of his receptions, meaning 73% of his receptions went for first down. That was fourth in the NFL of receivers with over 50 receptions. That's a huge number for a rookie. So that's really encouraging for him, that he knows where the sticks are and how to get to them.
Nice. Well, I'm going to stick with you. Who is your first breakout player?
So I took this guy because no one else was taking him. Other than David, I was last to the sheet. And it just seems like he's too popular. He's everyone's breakout pick. And I'm talking about Chigoziem Okonkwo, tight end for the Tennessee Titans. So I had to take him. I had to mention him because a lot of his stats from last year are very encouraging. And I know he can be an outlier. Keep in mind when we talked to Scott Connor a month or so ago, Chig is 6'2.5", and I believe the cutoff is 6'5" for tight ends with a tight end one season where it's maybe below 10% actually got there. But sometimes you have to bet on these guys being outliers because they do exist. And when it's not an overly expensive guy, I'm willing to take that bet. They used him all over the field last year. Of the top 10 tight ends, only Mark Andrews, Evan Ingram, and Travis Kelce played a lower percentage of their snaps in line. So Chig played 58.5% of his snaps in line. That's less than David Njoku, TJ Hawkinson, George Kittle, Cole Kmet, Pat Freiermuth, Tyler Higbee, Dalton Schultz. So they're going to be using him all over the field, and they're going to need to because that receiving core for Tennessee is a hot freaking mess. I mean, that's it. That receiving core might be the reason that John Robinson got fired. But, he's really explosive. He had 35.5-inch vertical. He's fast, 4'5", 240, versatile, judging by how they did play him all over the field, and he's efficient. So he was 30th in receptions of all tight ends last year, with over 10 receptions. And he finished fourth in big play rate. He finished fourth in big plays, and he finished first in big play rate. 43.75% of his receptions went for over 20 plus yards. So that's really exciting. That's really encouraging. So, go get Chig while you can. He has everything to make this a successful fantasy football season for him. It's talent, it's opportunity, and it's all coming together for him. So go get him.
I mean, I tend to think like besides Treylon Burks, like is he probably going to be like the most targeted person on that team? Like I'm just talking about like the pass catchers.
Yeah, I mean the other pass catchers that he's competing with are Nick Westbrook-Akina, Kyle Phillips, and who knows if they're going to use Tyjae Spears in the pass game.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's a two-man show to me, unless Kyle Phillips does something crazy, which I don't think he will. I actually wanted to pick Kyle Phillips here to talk about him a little bit, but none of his advanced receiving metrics were very impressive or encouraging in any way. So I did not pick him.
Just didn't blow you out of the water there. Poor Kyle Phillips.
No.
That's okay. All right. So I have a few and I couldn't decide who I wanted to talk about first. So I think I'm just gonna go for my homer pick that I picked first, which was Christian Watson from my Packers. Guys, last year he had 611 yards on 6 targets and 7 passing touchdowns. He led the team in touchdowns. Lazard only had 6. And he also had 2 rushing touchdowns, which I didn't realize, on 80 yards rushing last season. So at first I was kind of like, oh, is he really like a breakout? I don't know. But I think most of his stuff didn't really come on until the end of the season. So he spent the first part of the season, kind of relative obscurity. So that's why I decided to pick him. Downgrade at quarterback for sure, right? You're going from Aaron Rodgers to Jordan Love. We don't know what we've got in Jordan Love. But good news is that he's the guy now, right? Like it is going to be Jordan Love. It is his job to lose. So I don't see any reason why Matt LaFleur isn't going to let him just go, let him loose, see what they've got in him, and also now something big too, you don't think about, right? This is LaFleur's time to have complete control over that offense, right? Aaron Rodgers, as much as I adore Aaron Rodgers, and I absolutely do, that was his offense. That was his room. That was his show. He was running the calls, right? That was all him for the most part. I mean, they weren't going to do anything that he didn't want to do out there. So now that LaFleur kind of has that complete control, I'm kind of curious to see what that offense looks like and how they're going to, how they're going to run everything. But, you have to think too, look, Lazard's gone, Cobb's gone, Robert Tonyan's gone. Watson easily steps into that wide receiver 1 spot. He's got Romeo Doubs and Jaden Reed there as well, and a couple new, tight ends, but he's the guy, right? So he's got that spot. There's not really any competition for that number 1 spot. That is his. So even with that upgrade, right, to his role, I think it's got to also be just like a huge load off of his shoulders, kind of emotionally, right? Just to have Love under center, because I can't imagine how stressful it would be on a rookie coming into Green Bay, playing with Aaron Rodgers back there, knowing that the minute you make one mistake, you're dead to him, right? Like your head's going to be mounted over his like fireplace. Okay, if you drop that ball. And I mean, we saw that every year, right? Like somebody come in and he doesn't trust his rookies. He doesn't trust guys that he doesn't know. He doesn't have a rapport with. So now I think it's Christian Watson's, time to really get in there with Jordan Love. I hope those two are doing the Stafford Cooper Cup breakfast every day. Just really kind of building that bond so that they've got, that rapport on the field. Fun fact, all of his touchdowns came in week 10 through 13. So I am sure he endeared himself to quite a few fantasy managers coming through there, helping them propel them over into the fantasy playoffs with one Christian Watson. And I know he's going pretty high in a lot of drafts right now. I mean, I did a best ball one today and he was going pretty high. So, I don't really know how, affordable he'll be, so to speak, as opposed to a lot of these other guys we're going to talk about later on. But I really like Christian Watson. I think he's got a lot of opportunity. I think he'll shine this year.
Yeah, I was not a Watson believer. I think he's in a good spot now price-wise, but I've been pretty much fully converted to Christian Watson. He had some red flags as a prospect profile, the small school, the late declare. Yeah. So there's definitely some concerns there. But as a rookie, he was fantastic. Yeah. When we look at what he did as a contested threat and as a yards after catch threat, last year there were only 6 wide receivers who averaged more than 5 yards after the catch and caught more than 50% of their contested targets. Cooper Kupp, Chris Godwin, Mike Williams, Terry McLaurin, Christian Watson and Traylon Burks. So that's great company to be in as far as someone
Yeah.
who's generating yards after the catch and bringing down a lot of their contested targets.
So I have a question. If we're doing our startups right now,
Mhm.
and let's just say ADP is comparable, who are you investing in, Christian Watson or Garrett Wilson?
Oh, I think you'd have to go Garrett Wilson. I would go Garrett Wilson.
That's
Would
an
that-
ADP argument. I mean, you could argue Watson's a better value, but straight up, it's got to be Garrett Wilson. I mean, Garrett Wilson in Dynasty, I think the only wide receivers I'm taking ahead of him would be Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, and CeeDee Lamb. I think I would have Garrett Wilson above A.J. Brown in Dynasty just because of the age. When you look at what he did as a rookie, he was a top 10 early declare. Garrett Wilson, there are only, I believe, 7 of those in the past decade. So he's just a rare prospect. Now you pair him with Aaron Rodgers. I think it's pretty much Garrett Wilson to the moon this year.
What about Christian Watson or Devonta Smith?
Definitely Devonta Smith. Some of the guys who I have more in Christian Watson's range would be like Jerry Jeudy, Michael Pittman, Traylon Burks. And I think you can make an argument for a lot of those guys. But I like Watson as like a pivot down target. Like if I'm have a guy like DK Metcalf, who was not very good as like a difference-making producer last year. He was the lowest production of any receiver valued in the top 15. He was around 14 points per game. Now you talk about them adding Jackson Smith and Jigba. They're going to pass a little more, but they still want to run the ball. So if you can pivot from like a DK Metcalf to like sell DK in a 2 for Christian Watson and a future 1, I would definitely be on the Watson +1 side in that kind of deal.
Yeah, and the ADP is really not comparable. Garrett Wilson's going as wide receiver 5 at about 19, according to DLF, and Christian Watson's at wide receiver 22, going at 67. So like a solid 4 or 5 rounds later right now.
Well, that gives me some hope, though, for my Packers. I had to talk myself into it at first because I really wasn't super excited about Christian Watson. But now I feel much better now that we've done this. David, who's your second pick?
So I ended up going with a guy who I've been pretty much saying to sell in Dynasty for the past year and a half. But now I'm going to kind of talk about, some pros to him, and that's Damien Pierce, who I think is a good player, a good NFL player. The problem is sometimes we confuse actual real life skill with fantasy production. And Damien Pierce is probably ranked better as an NFL talent than he will produce as a fantasy producer. So he was, I don't even believe, top 24 in points per game as a rookie. He was very good. When we talk about advanced rushing, we want to look at running backs. What do they do after contact? What do they create for themselves? So we have the league leaders last year in yards after contact per attempt. Number 1 was Tony Pollard. Number 2 was Khalil Herbert. Number 3, Josh Jacobs. Number 4, Derrick Henry. Number 5, Nick Chubb. Number 6, Damien Pierce. So he's up at the top of the leaderboard in terms of yards after contact per attempt. He had a very good broken tackle rate. When we look at attempts for broken tackle, we had Lamar Jackson, number 1. He was breaking a tackle once every 8 attempts last year. Him and JT once every 8 attempts. Right behind them, Damien Pierce, 1 every 8.1 attempts. The rest of the top 5 was Ramondre, 8.8, 1 for every 8.8, and then Derrick Henry once every 10 attempts. So Damien Pierce was very good at running the ball, at creating for himself. And now we talk about CJ Stroud upgrades to quarterback position. They were in quarterback purgatory last year. CJ Stroud is much better than anything they were trotting out last year. Even as a rookie, he's going to be better. So that's going to make this offense as a whole better. It should increase touchdown equity, gives a little more touchdown upside to Damien Pierce. The question becomes, what is going to happen to him as a receiver? So they brought in Devin Singletary, who nobody is going to be pounding the table for as a talent. But is Singletary going to take the third down role? That's really what we want to know, because last year Damien Pierce had, I would say, a decent amount of receptions. He had 30 receptions in 13 games, 39 targets. But we want to see more if we want him to really be unleashed or, kind of pay off as like more than just like a meth pick. And Singletary last year kind of stole that show from James Cook, who's supposedly supposed to be this great receiving running back. Singletary had 52 targets. Cook had 32. So they bring in Singletary. Well, what kind of rotation is that going to look like? Is it going to be where Pierce is the guy and Singletary just gets a series? Or is Singletary going to kind of be that third down guy? I mean, that's going to be what makes or breaks Damien Pierce because he needs that receiving upside if he wants to get into that difference-making territory.
David, I swear you just like took the question that I had for you like right out of like my head and you just talked about it. I literally had written down right here like, oh, I wonder if Devin Singletary will have any effect, like on Damien Pierce's production. Like the little star to ask you about that, but you already got to that one. Jorge, Tyler, how do you guys feel about Damien Pierce? Does either one of you have any strong opinions one way or another?
I love him. I can't wait to snatch him up in drafts. I am one who's been going very zero RB in my drafts. At least I've been going, it's 3 wide receivers and maybe a tight end wide receiver. So to get Damien Pierce at that point in my drafts, at least that I've been encountering, I'll take that all day as my RB1. I just, you mentioned, David, NFL players who don't translate the fantasy. This guy clearly translated into the fantasy when he was on his game before the injury started taking toll and before they actually just benched him for the rest of the year. Just running hard. Just what impressed me the most out of him was the game versus the Philadelphia Eagles on Thursday Night Football. He literally ran all over one of the best defenses in all of football, and the production will be there. The question is, like you said, the third down efficiency. Is Devin Singletary going to siphon away opportunities from that? We'll see. I don't have Pierce's receiving metrics set up here, but I don't know personally. But kind of going off of on a tangent a little bit, I'm not actually low on Devin Singletary as I thought I would be. I actually like this opportunity for him, especially in third down situations and in passing situations with the rookie quarterback there. But no, I'm a huge fan of Damien Pierce. So yeah, that's a great pick right there.
Nice. Yeah, when I was looking at his stats and I saw that game against Philly, I just saw the yardage first, and I was like, "Oh wow, who is this against?" I look over, it was Philly, and I saw to myself, I was like, "Oh my god, he did that against Philly!" I completely forgot about that. It's crazy. So, Jorge, who is your next player?
So, David, I know you love your tight ends. I know you're a big tight end person. You're big. I'm curious to get your thoughts here, though, on Jake Ferguson of the Dallas Cowboys. There's obviously a target vacuum at that position. No Dalton Schultz he's now with the aforementioned Houston Texans. You had Peyton Hendershot, who was playing mostly receiving routes, whereas Ferguson was playing more as an inline blocker, as well as playing out in receiving routes. One thing I thought was really interesting that he ran 67% of his receiving routes on 155 pass play snaps. So he was actually out as a receiver more often than not, which is something that I found interesting. Obviously, target volume had to, played a major role there in the lack of production. But again, no Dalton Schultz. I get Hendershot is, in snaps that have him in passing situations. But some people will knock what I'm about to say very openly. I don't care that he's a blocker. I don't care that he blocks. Blocking doesn't help me in fantasy. You know what blocking does? It keeps you on the field. And if you're going 67% of your running routes off of pass play snaps, and you have an 86.4 reception percentage amongst all rookie tight ends last year, he was second in yards after the catch per reception. He was number 1 in NFL passer rating when targeted. He had the 4th highest yards per route run than any second-year tight end. He actually even had more targets in the slot versus a guy like Hendershot. So there is upside there. The reports out of camp so far have him, in the lead to be the lead tight end there. He's actually even attending. This is a thing. Tight End University, which is created by Travis Kelce and George Kittle. So he is taking that opportunity there to advance his game. He's super athletic. So somebody in this tight end core is going to have to eat. And I have no reason to believe it, based off opportunity, based off of snaps that are going to be on the field, that Hendershot has a chance to take that next step forward this coming year.
Well, I will say I'll have to first. I love the summary. I will disagree with you though on the blocking element. It does get you on the field for pass blocking and run blocking snaps, but it doesn't guarantee any sort of route participation. That's what we're after in fantasy. We don't get points for guys who are on the field for blocking. We want guys who are running routes. Ferguson what I do is charting tight ends. I basically do it's all color coded. And I want to get just a holistic view of their profile, right? So I chart every tight end in the top 50 dynasty tight ends. So what I do is I chart their height, their weight, their draft capital, their early declare status, yes or no if they were an early declare. I chart their 40 time, their vertical, their college dominator rating, which is basically just a productivity score. I chart their yards per reception in college, which is kind of like an I can't speak it all today, efficiency metric. And then I also chart their catch radius. Then I chart their NFL production, their points per game, their yards per route run. And Jake Ferguson is pretty much overall, he's just a guy. He is a 4th-round pick. He's a late declare. He ran a 4.81. He had a 10 yards per reception in college, so he's not fast. He's not efficient. He did have a very good dominator rating. He had a 28% college dominator rating in his best season, which is good. That's in the green. So he has shown in college that he can be productive, if not efficient, but productive. And then as a rookie, as you did talk about the per route numbers, he averaged 1.79 yards per route run, which is a really good per route number. And really, there is opportunity in this Dallas room. And we look at Dalton Schultz, even he did not have a good profile at all. It was almost all the red flags I just told you about Ferguson. Dalton Schultz had all of those red flags as well. And we saw Dalton Schultz have some level of productivity in a high-scoring offense with Dak Prescott at quarterback. And his main competition is going to be the incoming rookie, which is going to be the round 2 pick, Luke Schoonmaker, or however the heck you say it. And he doesn't chart very well in my process here either. We look at Schoonmaker. He was a 2nd-round pick, which is good. He was not an early declare. He's a solid athlete, 4'6", 340, 33.5-inch vertical. But his dominator rating was 15% in college. In 4 years, only got to 15%. That's not good. He was not productive really at any point. He was not efficient at 11.9 yards per reception. So Schoonmaker might have just kind of been overdrafted a little bit based on that 40 time. And we could see maybe Ferguson ends up being like that Dalton Schultz, where Schoonmaker ends up being like the Blake Jarwin, of the world. Obviously, Jarwin got hurt and probably a little bit worse profile than Schoonmaker to begin with. But there is opportunity, even if Ferguson's just a guy, for him to have value. And he's basically free right now. So definitely worth a stash.
Hey, so Gator put in the chat over here that Dallas has like 4 tight ends that are under 20 years old. They do have a lot of tight ends. David, I'm going to ask you, out of those 3, the ones that we know, Schoonmaker, I don't know how to say his name either, Ferguson and Hendershot, like who charts the highest out of your charts that you do?
It would be Schoonmaker just because he's got the draft capital, which is huge. When we look at draft capital, if you're drafted in the 1st round, you're basically a 90% hit rate at least one top 12 season. If you're drafted in the 2nd round, you have about a 40% hit rate at a top 12 season. So Schoonmaker was 2nd-round pick. Just on that alone, he's got about a 40% chance of at least one top 12 season. After that, it drops to like 30% for the 3rd round. 4th round, we're talking like 20%. And that's where Ferguson and, Hendershot, they just kind of become more like long shots. And then obviously the athleticism. Schoonmaker is the best athlete of the bunch as well.
All right. So it looks like Jamie popping in the chat with the only reason Dallas took Schoonmaker was because the player profile stats they posted. Yeah.
They do. The NFL loves speed, so he could easily be overrated. He was never a producer in college in 4 years, so that tells you something.
All right, well, Tyler, you're up. Tyler, who? It's your turn.
Yes, I am, and I am going to go out of order with the player that I wanted to go last with because we're going a little long, and I don't have faith that I'll get to go to my last guy. So I'm going to talk about Rasheed Shaheed, 2nd-year player out of Weber State. Absolute speed demon. This guy's flying all over the field. The biggest knock for him, I'm just going to start it up front. He was undrafted. David referenced it earlier in the show. He was not an early declare. He was not drafted. the odds are very much not in his favor to have a wide receiver 3 or a wide receiver 2 season. However, I watched him play last year, and he was extremely exciting. Kind of the narrative with this starts with the quarterback position in New Orleans. Obviously, they went and got Derek Carr, and Rasheed Shaheed had a very nice number in yards per reception last year, 17.4. So he was catching that ball. He was getting downfield. He was catching it downfield, and he was breaking away after the catch. Oh no, what's Derek Carr going to do? Derek Carr is the dump off guy. He throws the ball short. Nay, he is not. No longer is Derek Carr a dump off man. Once he got a little more comfortable in the Gruden offense and kind of came into his own as a quarterback, he started playing a little bit more YOLO ball. He's been chucking it all over the yard. A couple advanced passing metrics I looked at for Derek Carr. He was near the bottom of the league almost his entire career. So that stigma was earned. However, the last 2 years, in 2021, Derek Carr was intended air yards per attempt. All that means is the ball went X amount of yards in the air, whether the pass was completed or not. 2021, he had 8.1 intended air yards per attempt, which is 9th in the NFL. 2022, he had 9.1 intended air yards per attempt, 4th in the NFL. You saw that same thing with completed air yards per completion. So, they actually caught this one. 2021, he had 5.9. He was 13th in the NFL. 2022, he was 6.6. That's 4th in the NFL. So you can think Derek Carr is a dump off thrower all you want. He is no longer that dude. Back to Rasheed Shaheed, who we're actually talking about. So he led rookies with more than one reception in yards per reception in 22. Jameson Williams caught one ball for 44 yards, so I'm not going to count that. And we talked about 17.4 yards per reception. That's a huge number for a guy who he played quite a bit in the second half of the season. He was only 6th in average depth of target among this group, and he was 1st in yards per reception. So that's very encouraging. What that means is he's dangerous with the ball in his hands. This confidence Shaheed is displayed in him. He is their primary returner. He had 34 combined kick and punt returns. So that team has confidence in him with the ball in his hands, and they show that. So that man is dangerous. It could completely eliminate the Saints' need for a number 2 receiver once Michael Thomas is gone after this year. So I really like Shaheed, and I really like him to be a wide receiver 2 on that team moving forward.
Tyler, you literally, again, you and David just literally in my brain, plucking out the questions that I have for you. My question, I swear to you, I just wrote this down, was is there a world where we see Shaheed maybe take over that number 2 spot for Michael Thomas? I swear to you, I literally just wrote that down right here. You guys are answering my questions before I even get to them.
Heck yeah, that's awesome. But yeah, I really like him. I mean, I think him and Olave might make a nice pair. They can both play all over the field. They both played a lot in the slot. They both played a lot out wide. So I think they paired nicely, especially in 11 personnel with Michael Thomas. I'm excited to see what that receiving core can do this year if Thomas is on the field.
Nice.
Yeah, Carr actually completed 1 in 3 passes of 20-plus yard attempts. So if he was attempting 20-plus yards, 1 in 3, which is really good last year. 11 touchdowns and 4 interception ratio on passes 20-plus yards last year. So, yeah, he actually was really good. That's from PFF. I'm looking up right now.
Nice.
Don't believe the narrative on Carr.
It was surprising to see that, looking that up. Yeah, he was very good down the field. Is that leaving me? Are we doing the third one? Is that I can go through it quick.
I think so. I'm gonna do Jalen Warren real quick, and then if we want to do all of our third players, and maybe just make them a little bit quicker, because I know I want to get to these guys because we have a lot of good players left that I still want to talk about. So I hope everybody wants to hang with us. Yeah, we have a lot of love for Derek Carr on the show. Just made me think of, back when we were trying to matchmake for him and find out where he was going to end up, right? And now look at him, finding love in New Orleans with Rasheed Shaheed. There we go. Who would have thought I could tie it back to that? But I sure did.
You did really good there.
Yeah, all right. Well, since you talked about somebody who was undrafted, I want to talk about somebody who was undrafted also, and that would be Mr. Jalen Warren over from Pittsburgh, right? Last year, guys, he had 379 yards rushing, 1 touchdown. He was the second overall rusher behind Najee, obviously, who had over 1,000 yards. But he also had 214 yards receiving. Najee's reception yards were 229. So those guys are a little bit more equal when it comes to their usage in that area. So out of the 2022 rookies with at least 70 attempts, right? Guys that actually, got in there and were used, he was 3rd overall in receiving yards behind Rachaad White and Breece Hall. Okay. So for a guy coming in behind Najee Harris, who is basically like the guy, the bell cow there in Pittsburgh, that's pretty good. I will absolutely take those stats. I really think that he's got just huge upside, right? So if Najee gets hurt, he's the guy. He inherits that entire backfield. I don't really think Anthony McFarland is going to be too much competition for him in that way. And he's cheap, right? He's so cheap right now. Dynasty Nerds ADP for him has him at running back 70 out of 75. So there are 69 other running backs ahead of him. Somebody say nice. Come on, guys.
Nice.
Thank you.
Nice.
Thank you. I put that in there just for that. Okay, so they still.
I was told this was a PG show.
I don't know what that means.
It's one of those Disney jokes where the kids don't even know what's going on.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's looking for all the adults out there listening. So like we talked about earlier with Pickens, right? They still have Matt Canada back there, in charge of their offense. He's in the last year of his contract, right? Steelers ranked 26 overall in points per game last season. So if you guys are believing the rumors out of Pittsburgh, they're going to be incorporating a lot of changes into that offense this year. I'm sure Canada probably wants to keep his job. Warren said during an interview that I watched on YouTube, I think from like yesterday or the day before, that there were plans to get both him and Najee on the field at the same time. So if we're buying that, if we're buying all those, the rumors are out there on the fantasy streets, right? I think Warren is in for a really big season. And like I said, he's so cheap, you can grab him up anywhere for just almost nothing. So I think this player is, I potential for me, I think is one of the biggest potential for breakout is Mr. Jalen Warren, undrafted free agent. Hopefully he can, be the exception to the rule.
Can't wait to see someone tilt off the face of the earth when Najee Harris has his hand on the ground and he's playing fullback for Jalen Warren.
Oh, God.
Sounds like a Cleveland Browns fan talking.
It does. It does. Oh my goodness. All right. So David, I want to hear who your third player is. Who's
It's
your guy?
another tight end. It's another tight end, which I love to talk about. It's Trey McBride. And the case for Trey McBride is that he was a really good college prospect, and we didn't get a whole lot of new information on him after year one. And tight ends take a lot of time to develop anyway. So year one is not a humongous data point against any tight end. The case against him is that, he didn't really do much as a rookie, and the per route numbers weren't great. But when we look at the actual profile and the checklist, he checks a lot of boxes, Trey McBride. So he's 6'4", 246. That's a good size. He's a second-round pick, not an early declare. It's forgivable at tight end. Ran a 4.56 40 at his pro day, just 4.61. That's great. So he's got the athleticism. The dominator rating, 46% dominator rating in college, 13.7 yards per reception. So he was highly productive in college. He was basically his team's entire passing offense. He was efficient enough, and then he was drafted highly. First year, he played behind Zach Ertz for the first 10 games, I believe. So he was getting some routes, but they weren't really real routes. So he didn't get a lot of yardage, but he technically got routes. So that kind of hurt his yard per route run numbers. And then once Zach Ertz got hurt and he actually got a chance at being like the guy, the tight end one, Kyler Murray was injured and he was gone. And he got to play with Trace McSorley, David Blau, and all these other nobodies basically for the last 6 games. Or I shouldn't say all these other names, Colt McCoy, Trace McSorley, and David Blau. But still not a good set of quarterbacks to be catching passes from. So basically the case is, hey, let's re-roll on Trey McBride. Maybe the year one per route data was kind of related to Zach Ertz and the quarterback play more than it was an indictment of his actual talent.
So I have a question for you about Trey McBride. So if Zach Ertz doesn't necessarily start the season healthy, right, and Trey McBride is the guy again starting off game one, right? What or how likely is it, do you think, that he just never gives that job back?
That's a really good question. That's going to come down to Trey McBride because Zach Ertz is not going to go quietly into the night. He is what we call a habitual performer, Zach Ertz. He just every year seems to just keep performing. Even at this age now, he's now 32. He had a great profile coming into the NFL as a second-round pick, 32% college honor. Not a great athlete, Zach Ertz, but he was highly drafted, highly productive in college. So he's just a guy who's just going to have a role. Like Trey McBride's not going to just own the entire tight end room if Zach Ertz is healthy and productive. So I wouldn't say run away with it and never give it back, but he could stay the preferred option if he plays well early in the season.
Nice. All right, Jorge, who is your number 3?
So this is going to be pretty short and sweet because this is his amount of playing time last year was pretty short and sweet. It was one game. It's kind of hard not to break out when you have more than one game talking about Sam Howell as the quarterback for the Commanders. Look, when you have Terry McLaurin, Jahan Dotson, Curtis Samuel, and Antonio Gibson to throw to, and I'm assuming that Antonio Gibson is finally going to be utilized in that fashion, unlike the past few seasons with Scott Turner as the offensive coordinator. The upside is definitely going to be there. We saw a little bit of his mobility in week 18 last year versus Dallas, but all the reports out of minicamps and OTAs have been he's been looking fantastic. He's looking like he's commanding the offense. When you have the great skill players around a quarterback and you have good offensive coaching, it's kind of hard to mess that up. Ask Brock Purdy. Brock Purdy benefited from that a lot last year down the stretch. There's no reason why, if things keep progressing as they have been this offseason, that Sam Howell can't have a breakout season. And again, it's not going to take much. All he has to do is just have 2 weeks of production and then boom, breakout. There you go. So especially for Superflex or 2 quarterback leagues, he's somebody that could definitely move up the rankings as your second quarterback. And he probably is going pretty late in startups anyhow. So if you have the deep bench spot, why not take a flyer on Sam Howell?
Yes.
I will say, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just saying I've done that in several places recently. David, what were you going to say?
I would say one guy to keep an eye on as well is Jacoby Brissette because he played very, very well last year. He had a 12-6 touchdown to interception ratio. He was top 12 in quarterback rating. He played very well, and Ron Rivera wants to win games. He said it himself, if a veteran beats out Sam Howell, so be it. These are for Rivera, so be it. He wants to win games. He's not going to just keep trotting out Sam Howell if he's not performing up to par. Jacoby Brissette will get a chance if he is given a chance to play, and he will play decently well, especially with these options, and he's a fairly willing scrambler as well. He had 243 rushing yards and 11 starts last year. So if I have a sleeper to be this year's Geno Smith, it would be Jacoby Brissette.
Hello.
Oh.
I'm not hitting that as a Commanders fan, so hey.
I don't see how that entire offense doesn't take a huge step forward, right? With Eric Bieniemy back there. No, I think that's fun. I think that's going to make your offense really fun, Jorge. You should be excited.
I'm tempering expectations, but hoping for the best.
Cautiously optimistic. Tyler, who is your last player?
All right, this one will be quick because he really didn't play at all last year. But I'm going with Jerome Ford from the Browns. That's my homer pick. So he is now the Browns' RB2 with Kareem Hunt and Dearness Johnson gone. The Browns made absolutely no effort to fill that role. They didn't draft anyone. They didn't sign anyone in free agency. They are rolling with Nick Chubb, Jerome Ford, and Demetric Felton. So those are their running backs this year, barring a veteran signing. His second year out of Cincinnati. He has the pedigree. He started at Alabama. He transferred out with that glut of running backs they had, Josh Jacobs, Najee Harris, all those guys. So he went to Cincy, and he played there his senior year, absolutely dominated, 1,319 rushing yards, 220 receiving yards on 21 receptions, totaled 20 touchdowns when he helped lead the Bearcats to the college football playoffs. He's powerfully built, 5'11", 215 pounds, and he's fast, 4.46 speed. So I have been targeting, like the high-end players on people who are rostering Jerome Ford for trades just to throw him in as an extra piece. So I feel like I have him all over the place just because, it doesn't really cost anything. And if he does what I think he can do, then I will be very happy.
Well, it looks like you're getting a Ford jersey. I don't know if you saw that in the chat down there.
Yeah. Oh, man. I'm getting a Jerome Ford jersey and a Gary Barnidge jersey. This is like Christmas.
It is.
All the obscure players.
Well, I'm just going to continue on with the theme of players who didn't play a lot last season with my last pick, guys. And that would be Mr. Wan'Dale Robinson from the Giants, right? He only played a third of the seasons, like 6 games. So when I was looking at this, I was like, stats probably aren't the best way to accurately evaluate him when he's only played so few games. He had that week 11 ACL tear, but the last game that he did play in, he had 9 receptions for 100 yards in that game where he was injured. So obviously they're using him. They want to use him and want to use him quite a bit. So, he's just known for being an explosive player. He's got that ability to separate. The Giants have kind of just really kind of like DIY'd their wide receiver room, right? They're just kind of like pieced together, and it's not really besides Tennessee, like Tyler, like you talked about like earlier, like woof, right? I mean, it's kind of rough. You've got like Paris Campbell, Jameson Crowder, Sterling Shepard, Darius Slayton, not guys that are really inspiring, in my opinion. If there are any Giants fans out there, I'm not even going to apologize for that because that's just kind of the way it is. But obviously they brought in Waller, right? But he's got an injury history and he's 30. So, a little bit on the older end. But who knows? Maybe Waller has kind of a resurgence in New York, but his last couple years in Vegas were not, super exciting either. One thing that I did note, right? They gave Daniel Jones this big extension, right, in the offseason. Second year with Brian Daboll at the helm. I think the pressure really is on to show that contract was worth it and that the offense can compete in their division. So I feel like they're going to definitely use Wan'Dale. He should be coming back healthy, here towards, I think it's like 10 months or so removed from that ACL tear by the time the season will be starting. So I don't see any reason why he won't be healthy right off the bat. And he's got such an easy path to relevance on that team. I don't see any reason why he can't take over that number 1 receiver role in that particular offense. And also, again, he's super cheap. I did a dynasty profile for him that I'll be out a little bit later where I go into a little bit more detail on it, but we are running a little bit long tonight. But yeah, I really like Wan'Dale Robinson, especially where you can get him. And he's a real fun player anyway. So there we go. Anybody have any feelings about Wan'Dale or about that New York offense?
There sure are a lot of wide receivers there.
Oh my gosh, right?
I don't know if any of them are good, but there's a lot of them.
It's kind of like they just thought, we'll just keep adding more and maybe we can like combine all of them into one. It'll be okay. That was the only thing I could think of as to what was going on there, why they didn't go out and make a big signing. Or
if they did that, they might have one solid number 2 wide receiver.
That's fair. That is absolutely fair with the names that are on that depth chart. 100%.
Yeah. Sterling Shepard, Paris Campbell, and Wan'Dale Robinson might all combine for a full season of games played.
Oh, come on now.
Sorry.
Harsh.
Just harsh words. All right. Well, we will stop there. We will end it there tonight, guys. I just want to say a huge thank you, David. This has been so much fun. I hope you've had a good time tonight. Thank you so much for spending your evening with us. Guys, if you're not following David already, please make sure to go on to @GuruFantasyWorld. That's WRLD. Okay. So David, I would like you to tell us, what are you working on right now?
Right now, I'm just working on everything to do with Patreon. Just posted the latest monthly write-up. So I'm doing basically a monthly write-up every month for the patrons, basically a buy, sell report, recommended dynasty trades, just an NFL draft recap, organizing all the rankings. So basically Patreon is just consuming my time, and that's where I'm doing all the exclusive stuff.
Awesome. Where can people find that information?
Just patreon.com/Guru Fantasy World. There's actually an O in that one, though. It's not like Twitter where there's character limits and I had to chop one out.
Thank you for clarifying. Guys, make sure you're following all of us on social media. Guys, make sure you're following Jorge at Jorge B. Edwards. You can follow Tyler over at FF Tyler Howell. Follow me at Stacy_Perez83. Guys, make sure you're following all of us here on Fantasy and Frames Dynasty365 show. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Guys, this was such a great time tonight. Everybody have a great night, and we'll see you again on Wednesday this week. Wednesday, put it on your calendar, 8 o'clock.